The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter, two pink lines staring back at me like they knew something I didn't want to believe. My hand was shaking, not from joy, not from excitement, from the sick, twisting feeling in my gut that told me this wasn't going to be the beautiful moment I'd imagined when I was a little girl playing house. Because 3 weeks ago, my husband told me he wanted a divorce. And yesterday, I saw him holding hands with my best friend outside a coffee shop downtown. I'm Hilara Mendez, and this is the story of how I lost everything and found out I was carrying his child on the same day I signed papers that said we were strangers. Let me take you back to when I still believed in forever. When I thought love was something you could hold on to if you just tried hard enough. When I trusted the two people who would eventually rip my world apart. I met Ronan Hale on a Tuesday afternoon outside Miller's Flower Shop on Maple Avenue. I was 24, fresh out of college, teaching art to middle schoolers who thought painting was boring until I showed them it could be rebellion on canvas. He was standing there with a book in his hands, pretending to read, but the book was upside down. I laughed. I couldn't help it. He looked up, caught red-handed, and his cheeks turned the color of the roses in the window display. I was just checking if anyone would notice, he said with his crooked smile that made something flutter in my chest. Well, I noticed, I said, still grinning. Good, he replied. That was the whole point. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. That conversation outside the flower shop turned into coffee. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into late-night phone calls where we'd talk until the sun came up, and neither of us could keep our eyes open. Ronan wasn't like the guys I'd dated before. He wasn't trying to impress me with money or smooth lines. He was just real. He worked construction, came home with dirt under his fingernails and stories about the crew that made me laugh until my stomach hurt. He listened when I talked about my students, about the paintings I wanted to create someday, about my dream of having a little house with a garden where I could grow vegetables and sunflowers. You make simple things sound beautiful, he told me once, and I felt a little bit more. We got married a year later in a small ceremony at the community center. Nothing fancy, just 50 people we loved, string lights hanging from the ceiling, and a playlist I made myself with songs that meant something to us. And standing right next to me, holding my bouquet and fixing my veil, was Lyra Finn, my best friend since freshman year of college. The girl who stayed up with me through breakups and finals and family drama. The one who knew my coffee order, my worst fears, and the password to my Netflix account. Lyra was everything I wasn't. Bold where I was quiet. Confident where I second-guessed myself. She walked into rooms like she owned them, and people noticed. I loved that about her. I loved how she made me feel braver just by being near her. You're going to be so happy, she whispered to me before I walked down the aisle. He's lucky to have you. I believed her. I believed everything back then. The first 3 years of marriage were good. Really good. We didn't have much money, but we had enough. Ronan picked up extra shifts when he could. I sold paintings online and taught private lessons on weekends. Our apartment was small, but we made it ours. We painted the living room yellow because I said it felt like sunshine. We danced in the kitchen while pancakes burned on the stove. We stayed up late watching old movies and fell asleep tangled together on the couch. Lyra came over most Fridays. She'd bring wine and takeout, and the three of us would sit around the coffee table playing cards and laughing at inside jokes that didn't make sense to anyone else. You two are disgusting, she'd tease, watching Ronan kiss my forehead. Like a Hallmark movie threw up in here. But she was smiling when she said it, and I thought she was happy for us. I didn't notice when things started to change. Or maybe I did, and I just told myself I was being paranoid. It started small. Ronan working later than usual. Missing dinner without calling. Coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. New project at work, he'd say, barely looking at me. Big client. Lots of pressure. I nodded. I made him a plate and left it in the microwave. I kissed him good night, even when he didn't kiss me back. Lyra was around more. Stopping by when I was at work. Texting Ronan to ask if he needed anything from the store. Little things that seemed helpful at the time. She's just being a good friend, I told myself. You're lucky to have people who care. But then Ronan stopped touching me. Stopped holding my hand when we walked. Stopped laughing at my jokes. He'd fall asleep on the couch with his phone clutched to his chest, and when I tried to wake him, he'd jerk away like I'd burned him. I tried everything. I cooked his favorite meals. I wore the dress he used to say made me look like I stepped out of a dream. I left notes in his lunch bag that said things like "I love you" and "I miss you" and "come back to me." But he was already gone. I just didn't know it yet. The night, he told me, was ordinary. Rain tapping against the windows. The smell of cinnamon tea filling the kitchen. I was chopping vegetables for stir-fry when he walked in with this look on his face. Heavy, distant, like he was carrying something he couldn't hold anymore. "Ilara," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Those 4 words. Everyone knows what those 4 words mean. My hands froze on the cutting board. About what? He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and set on the counter between us. Divorce papers. My brain couldn't process it. I laughed. Actually laughed. "Is this a joke? Because it's not funny." "I can't do this anymore," he said, and his voice was flat. Empty. Like he'd practiced this speech in the mirror until it didn't hurt him anymore. "Can't do what?" I whispered. "This. Us. I'm not happy." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "So we fix it. We talk. We go to counseling. We don't just give up. I'm in love with someone else." The room tilted. The knife slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. "Who?" I managed to choke out, even though part of me already knew. Deep down, in the place where gut feelings live, I already knew. He looked away. Couldn't even meet my eyes. "It's Lyra." And just like that, my entire world shattered into pieces so small I didn't know how I'd ever put them back together. But here's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It rewrites your past. Every memory, every laugh, every moment you thought was real suddenly becomes a question mark. How long had they been lying to me? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there in my kitchen with vegetables half chopped and rain hammering against the windows, staring at the man I thought I'd grow old with. "Say something," Ronan whispered. What was I supposed to say? That the 2 people I loved most in the world had been stabbing me in the back while I smiled and poured them coffee? That every Friday night I'd sat between them, laughing at jokes that were probably about me? How long? My voice came out strange. Hollow. He shifted his weight. Wouldn't look at me. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters." "How long have you been sleeping with my best friend?" The words tasted like poison coming out of my mouth. 6 months, he said quietly. 6 months. Half a year. While I was planning our anniversary dinner. While I was telling Lyra about how distant he'd been and asking her advice. While she looked me in the eye and said marriage takes work and don't give up on him. I thought about every time she'd hugged me. Every time she'd said, "I love you." Every time I cried on her shoulder about feeling lonely in my own marriage. She knew. The whole time, she knew why. "Get out," I said. "Ilara, get out of my house." My voice was shaking now. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." He grabbed his keys off the counter. Hesitated like he wanted to say something else. But what else was there to say? Sorry? Sorry doesn't unbreak a heart. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there in the silence that followed. The tea kettle was still whistling. The rain was still falling. But everything else had stopped. I don't remember the next few hours clearly. I remember sliding down the kitchen wall until I was sitting on the floor. I remember the cold tile against my legs. I remember staring at the divorce papers and thinking this had to be a nightmare I'd wake up from. But I didn't wake up. My phone buzzed. A text from Lyra. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Please talk to me." I blocked her number. Then I blocked Ronan's. Then I turned off my phone and sat in the dark until the sun came up. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork and people asking if I was okay, when the answer was so obviously no. My mom flew in from Arizona. She didn't say much, just held me while I cried and made sure I ate something even when food tasted like cardboard. "You're going to get through this," she kept saying. "You're stronger than you think." But I didn't feel strong. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything important and left just the shell. Work was the only thing that kept me sane. My students didn't know about the divorce. They didn't know their art teacher went home every night to an empty apartment and cried herself to sleep. To them, I was still Ms. Mendez who let them paint whatever they wanted and played music during class. I threw myself into teaching. Stayed late grading papers I could have graded in 10 minutes. Volunteered for every committee and extra assignment. Anything to avoid going home. But the town was small. People talked. And in a small town, everyone knows your business before you do. I'd see the looks at the grocery store, the whispers at the gas station, the way conversations would stop when I walked into a room. Did you hear about Alara Mendez? Her husband left her for her best friend. Can you imagine? I always thought there was something off about Lyra. Poor thing. She must be devastated. I hated the pity more than the betrayal. At least betrayal was honest. Pity was just people feeling better about their own lives by feeling sorry for yours. One afternoon, I was leaving school when I saw them. Ronan and Lyra, walking down Main Street, holding hands like they were in a romantic movie and not a home-wrecking nightmare. She saw me first. Her face went pale. She said something to Ronan, and they crossed the street to avoid me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just losing a husband. I was losing my best friend. My person. The girl who knew all my secrets and dreams and fears. Except she'd become my worst nightmare instead. I got in my car and drove. Just drove. No destination. No plan. I ended up at the lake outside town where Lyra and I used to go in college. We'd sit on the dock with our feet in the water and talk about our futures. I'm going to marry someone exciting, she'd said once. Someone who makes me feel alive. I just want someone who makes me feel safe, I'd replied. That's because you're boring, she'd teased, pushing my shoulder. I'm not boring. I'm careful. Same thing. I laughed it off back then. But sitting there on that dock years later, I wondered if she'd always thought I was boring. If she'd looked at my quiet life with Ronan and thought she deserved it more. If she decided to take it just because she could. My coworker Marla was the one who noticed something was really wrong. Not wrong like heartbreak wrong. Wrong like physically wrong. You look terrible, she said one morning in the teacher's lounge. Real subtle, Marla. When's the last time you ate a full meal? Eat. When's the last time you slept through the night? I didn't answer. Alara, you need to take care of yourself. I know you're going through hell, but you're going to make yourself sick. I'm fine, I said, but even as the words came out, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the counter. That's it. I'm taking you to the doctor. Marla, I don't need. Not up for debate. Come on. She drove me to the urgent care clinic on 4th Street. Made me sign in. Sat with me in the waiting room even though she had lesson plans to write. The nurse took my vitals and asked the standard questions. When was your last period? Any nausea? Dizziness? Fatigue? I answered automatically, not really thinking about it. My period had been late, but I'd chalked it up to stress. The nausea was grief. The exhaustion was heartbreak. We're going to run a few tests, the nurse said with a smile that made my stomach drop. 20 minutes later, she came back with a clipboard and that same smile. Congratulations, Alara. You're pregnant. The room tilted sideways. I'm what? About 8 weeks along, based on your hormone levels. We'll schedule you for an ultrasound to confirm, but that's not possible. The test is very accurate. We ran it twice to be sure. At Marla, at the beige walls of the examination room. 8 weeks. That meant the baby was conceived right before Ronan left. Maybe even the last time we'd been together, when I've been trying so hard to fix what was already broken. I was carrying the child of a man who'd chosen my best friend over me. Marla drove me home in silence. When we got to my apartment, she walked me to the door and squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, she said quietly. I'm here. Okay. I nodded. Couldn't speak. Inside, I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub and my hand on my stomach. There was a tiny human in there. A piece of Ronan and a piece of me, growing together like they didn't know their parents were falling apart. For a long time, I didn't move. Didn't think. Just existed in that moment between knowing and deciding. Then, slowly, I started to cry. Not sad tears. Not angry tears. Something else. Something I couldn't name. And underneath all the confusion and fear and hurt, I felt something else too. A tiny spark of hope. Like maybe I hadn't lost everything after all. But I had a choice to make. A choice that would change everything. I didn't tell anyone about the pregnancy for 3 weeks. Not my mom. Not Marla. Definitely not Ronan. I just carried the secret around like a stone in my pocket, heavy and hidden. Every morning, I'd wake up and put my hand on my stomach and whisper, "What am I going to do with you?" like the baby might answer back. Part of me wanted to call Ronan, tell him, make him face what he'd left behind. But the other part, the part that was learning to protect itself, said no. This baby deserves better than being a guilt trip or an obligation. So I kept quiet and made lists at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. Reasons to keep the baby. Reasons not to. Reasons I was terrified. Reasons I was secretly excited in a way that felt wrong given everything else. The divorce was moving forward. Ronan's lawyer sent papers. My lawyer sent papers. Everything was civil and cold and empty of the life we'd built together. You want to split everything 50-50. The furniture, the savings account, the wedding gifts. Like you could divide a marriage into neat little boxes and call it even. I signed everything without reading it. I didn't care about the couch or the coffee maker or the framed pictures we'd hung on the walls. I just wanted it done. But then his lawyer sent an email asking about my medical expenses. We noticed several recent doctor's appointments on the shared insurance. As per the divorce agreement, both parties are responsible for medical costs incurred during the marriage. Please provide documentation. My hand froze on the mouse. They wanted documentation, which meant they'd see the ultrasound, the prenatal vitamins, the prescription for morning sickness. I called my lawyer in a panic. Her name was Rita Sanchez, and she was the kind of woman who wore sharp suits and didn't take garbage from anyone. Can they access my medical records? I asked. Not without your permission. What's going on, Alara? I hesitated. Then the words just came out. I'm pregnant. Silence on the other end. Then does he know? No. Do you want to know? That was the question, wasn't it? Did I want Ronan to know he was going to be a father? Did I want him to have a say in this child's life after what he'd done to mine? I don't know. I whispered. Then don't decide right now. We can remove you from the shared insurance retroactively. Make it look like you switched coverage before the appointments. Technically legal as long as we file the right paperwork. Is that ethical? Ethics and family law don't always overlap, honey. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. This is your choice. Your body. Your baby. You decide when and if he finds out. I thanked her and hung up. Sat there staring at my phone. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to tell him. Not now. Maybe not ever. This baby was mine. The one good thing that came from the wreckage of my marriage. And I'd be damned if I let Ronan and Lyra ruin that too. The next day, I put a down payment on a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom. But it had good light and a little balcony where I could put plants. Far enough from my old neighborhood that I wouldn't run into them at the store or the coffee shop. A fresh start. That's what I needed. Moving day was brutal. Not because of the physical work, but because of the memories. Every box I packed was full of ghosts. The wine glasses Lyra gave us for our wedding. Donated. The photo album from our honeymoon. Trash. The blanket we used to curl up under on winter nights. Trash. I kept only what I needed. Clothes. Books. My art supplies. Everything else could burn for all I cared. Marla helped me move. So did 2 other teachers from school and a guy from church whose name I could never remember, but who showed up with a truck and didn't ask questions. By sunset, I was standing in my new apartment surrounded by boxes and feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again. That night, I sat on the floor and opened my laptop. Started searching for things I never thought I'd need to search for. Single mom support groups. How to afford a baby alone. Co-parenting with someone you hate. Except I wasn't planning to co-parent. I was planning to disappear. The town was buzzing with news of Ronan and Lyra's upcoming wedding. They'd set a date for October. Just 6 months after the divorce would be final. Isn't that a little fast? Someone asked at the grocery store, not realizing I was in the next aisle. When you know, another voice replied. Besides, they've been together for a while now. Might as well make it official. I gripped my shopping cart and focused on not throwing up. Morning sickness and public humiliation were not a good combination. At the checkout, the cashier looked at my items. Zinger ale. Crackers. Prenatal vitamins. She smiled. Congratulations. When are you due? February, I said automatically, then realized I'd just told a stranger something I hadn't told anyone who mattered. Winter baby. That's nice. Is this your first? I nodded. It goes by fast. Enjoy it. I wanted to laugh. Enjoy it. Like being pregnant and alone and heartbroken was something to savor. But I just smiled and paid and left. The pregnancy started to show around month 4. Not much, but enough that I had to buy bigger shirts and avoid tight dresses. I told my principal I needed to take the next school year off for personal reasons. She didn't pry, just nodded and said my job would be waiting when I came back. I told my mom on a Sunday afternoon call. "You're what?" She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Pregnant, Mom." "Does Ronan know?" "No." "Alara Marie Mendez, you have to tell him. He has a right. He has a right to nothing," I snapped. He gave up his rights when he chose Lyra. This is his child too, and it's my body, my choice, and I choose not to tell him. She tried to argue, talked about responsibility and doing the right thing and what-ifs. But I made up my mind. "If you want to be part of this baby's life," I said quietly, "then you need to respect my decision." She went silent, then sighed. "I just don't want you to regret this later. The only thing I regret is trusting people who didn't deserve it." We hung up tense, didn't talk for 2 weeks. But eventually she called back and said she was coming to visit when the baby was born. That was enough for now. I started painting again, really painting. Not the safe, pretty landscapes I sold online, but raw, emotional pieces that bled color and chaos. A woman standing in a storm, a heart split down the middle, hands reaching for something that wasn't there. I painted my anger, my grief, my hope, and people bought them. Not because they were beautiful, but because they were real. I opened an Etsy shop, posted on Instagram, built a following of people who connected with the messy, complicated truth of my work. The money wasn't much, but it was mine. Every dollar I made was a dollar I earned on my own terms. I started to feel like maybe I could do this. Be a single mom, raise a kid without a father, build a life that didn't need anyone else's approval. But then one afternoon in my 6th month, I was at the farmer's market picking out apples when I heard a voice behind me. "Alara." I turned, and there she was, Lyra. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her hair was shorter, and she wasn't wearing the bright color she used to love. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Every fiber of my being wanted to say no, to walk away, to pretend she didn't exist. But there was something in her eyes, something broken. "You've got 5 minutes," I said. We sat on a bench near the strawberry stand. She twisted her engagement ring around her finger. "I know you hate me," she started. "That's an understatement. I just wanted you to know, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." "How far did you mean for them to go, Lyra? When did it start?" "When you were standing next to me at my wedding. When you were crying on my couch about your own breakups. When—" She flinched. "It was a mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. This was a choice. You chose to sleep with my husband. You chose to lie to my face every single day. You chose to destroy everything I had. I know." Her voice cracked. "And I hate myself for it." "Good. You should." She looked at me then, really looked, and her eyes dropped to my stomach. "Are you?" I stood up. "My 5 minutes are up. Alara, please. Stay away from me, Lyra. I mean it. You don't get to be sorry. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. You made your bed. Now lie in it." I walked away before she could respond, before I could see if she was crying, before I could let any part of me feel sorry for her. Because she didn't deserve my sympathy. She deserved exactly what she got. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the look on her face when she saw my stomach. And I wondered if keeping the secret was about protecting my baby or punishing Ronan. Maybe both. Winter came early that year. By November, snow was already falling, and I was 7 months pregnant and roughly the size of a small house. Everything hurt. My back, my feet, my heart on the days when I let myself think too much. I'd stopped going into town unless I absolutely had to. Couldn't handle the stares, or the whispers, or running into people who knew Ronan and Lyra. Instead, I stayed home, painted, and talked to my baby. "Your mom's a mess," I'd say, rubbing my belly. "But she's trying. That's got to count for something, right?" The baby would kick in response, and I'd take that as agreement. I'd set up the nursery in the corner of my bedroom. It wasn't much. A secondhand crib from Facebook Marketplace. A dresser I'd painted white. A rocking chair my mom sent from Arizona with a note that said, "Every mother needs one." I bought exactly 3 outfits. gender-neutral yellows and greens, because I decided not to find out if I was having a boy or girl. I wanted at least one surprise in this whole mess to be a good one. Marla threw me a small baby shower at her house. Just a few teachers from school and some women from the church group I'd started attending. No one asked about the father. They just brought diapers and onesies and casseroles I could freeze for after the baby came. "You're going to be a great mom," Marla said, hugging me carefully around my giant stomach. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because you haven't given up. That's half the battle right there." I wanted to believe her. But late at night, when the baby was pressing on my ribs and I couldn't sleep, I'd panic. What if I couldn't do this? What if I wasn't enough? What if this kid grew up and hated me for not giving them a father? I'd read articles about single moms, about how kids need two parents, about how hard it was to do it alone. But then I'd think about Ronan, about how he'd left without a second thought, about how he'd chosen Lyra over me, over us, over everything we'd built. And I'd think, maybe no father is better than a father who doesn't want you. One afternoon in early December, I was at the clinic for a routine checkup when I saw him. Ronan, standing in the parking lot talking on his phone. I froze, tried to turn around before he saw me. But I was 7 months pregnant and about as subtle as a parade float. He looked up. Our eyes met. His phone slipped from his hand. For a second, neither of us moved. Just stood there in the cold parking lot with snowflakes falling between us. Then he was walking toward me. "Fust, Alara, is that? Are you?" "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Just don't. You're pregnant. Congratulations." "You have eyes. Is it mine?" The question hit me like a slap. "Excuse me? I mean, when's the due date?" "Because we've been divorced for February. Do the math yourself." His face went white, then red, then something else I couldn't read. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Why would I?" "Because it's my child. Now you care about what's yours?" "That's funny, Ronan. Because I was yours too, and you threw me away like garbage." "That's not fair." "You want to talk about fair? Fine. Let's talk about how you cheated on me with my best friend. Let's talk about how you divorced me while I was pregnant with your child. Let's talk about how you're marrying her in 3 months like I never existed. I didn't know you were pregnant. And if you had, would it have changed anything? Would you have stayed? Or would you have just felt guilty while you did the same thing anyway?" He opened his mouth, closed it, didn't answer. "That's what I thought," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an appointment." I walked past him into the clinic, my whole body shaking. The nurse took one look at my face and brought me water. "You okay, honey?" "Fine, ilid. Just cold." But my blood pressure was through the roof, and the doctor made me lie down for 20 minutes until it came back down. "You need to avoid stress," she said gently. "I know that's easier said than done, but for the baby's sake, try to stay calm." I nodded, wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to ask how I was supposed to stay calm when my entire life was a dumpster fire. When I finally left the clinic, Ronan was gone. But there was a note under my windshield wiper. "We need to talk. Please. Air." I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash can by the door. He didn't get to do this. Didn't get to waltz back into my life because he'd been caught. Didn't get to play concerned father when he'd spent the last 6 months playing house with Lyra. That night he called. I didn't answer. He called again. And again. Left voicemails that started apologetic and ended frustrated. "Alara, you can't just ignore me. This is my kid too. We need to figure this out. Call me back. Please." I deleted every message without listening to the whole thing. Then I blocked his number. Again. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there with flowers and a desperate look on his face. "I know you're home, Alara. Please. Just 5 minutes. Go away, Ronan. I'm not leaving until we talk. Then I hope you like the cold." I turned off the lights and sat on the couch in the dark until I heard his footsteps walking away an hour later. But the flowers stayed on my doorstep, frozen and sad and trying too hard. Marla came over the next morning and found me stress-eating ice cream for breakfast. "He knows," I said before she could ask. "Ronan saw me at the clinic. Now he won't leave me alone." She sat down next to me. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go back in time and never meet him." "Okay, but let's deal with reality. Do you want him involved?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Did I want my child to have a father? Yes. Did I want that father to be Ronan? I didn't know anymore. What if he's a good dad? I said quietly. What if he's a terrible husband, but a good father? And I keep them apart out of spite. That's not spite, Alara. That's protection. But what if I'm wrong? What if 20 years from now, my kid hates me for not giving them a chance to know their father? Marla squeezed my hand. You can't predict the future. You can only make the best choice you can with what you know right now. And right now, you know Ronan hurt you, betrayed you, left you. Those are facts. He says he wants to be involved. He also said he loved you. Words are easy. Actions matter. She was right. But that didn't make the decision any easier. That night, I wrote Ronan an email. Deleted it. Wrote another one. Deleted that too. Finally, I settled on something short. If you want to be part of this child's life, prove it. Show up. Be consistent. Don't do this because you feel guilty. Do it because you actually want to be a father. And if you can't promise that, then walk away now. Because my baby deserves better than half-hearted. I hit send before I could change my mind. He responded in 10 minutes. I promise. I want this. I want to be there. Tell me what to do. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one more thing. You can come to the birth. But after that, we'll see. Because the truth was, I didn't know if I could trust him. Didn't know if he'd actually show up or if he'd disappear again when things got hard. But maybe, just maybe, I could give him one chance. One. Not for him. For the baby growing inside me, who deserved at least the possibility of having a father. Even if that father had broken their mother's heart. Christmas came and went in a blur of morning sickness that apparently didn't know it was supposed to be over after the first trimester. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my apartment, eating leftover Chinese food and watching old movies while my baby did gymnastics in my stomach. Your first Christmas, I whispered, hand on my belly. Not quite what I pictured, kid. My mom had begged me to come to Arizona. Marla invited me to her family dinner. Even my principal, Mrs. Hernandez, offered to have me over. But I said no to all of them. I needed to be alone, needed to sit with the silence and figure out who I was becoming. Because I wasn't the same Alara who'd married Ronan. Wasn't the same girl who'd trusted easily and loved openly and believed people when they said forever. I was someone harder now, someone with sharper edges. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad, just different. Ronan texted on Christmas morning. Merry Christmas. How are you feeling? I left him on read for 3 hours before responding. Fine. He was trying. I'd give him that. Since I'd sent that email, he'd been checking in once a day. Nothing pushy, just asking how I was. Asking about doctor's appointments. Asking if I needed anything. I said no every time, because accepting help felt like accepting him back into my life, and I wasn't ready for that. But part of me, the part one tried to ignore, noticed that he was actually showing up. Actually trying. Lyra, according to town gossip, was not handling the news well. I heard through Marla, who heard through her sister, who heard through someone at the hair salon that Lyra had lost it when she found out about the baby. She threw a lamp at him. Marla reported over coffee at her kitchen table. Smashed his car window. Told him if he went back to you, she'd make his life hell. I don't want him back, I said automatically. I know, but apparently she doesn't believe that. The wedding was still on, supposedly, but people were placing bets on whether they'd actually make it down the aisle. I try not to care. Try to focus on my own life, my own future. But there was something darkly satisfying about knowing they were falling apart. Karma, I thought. Sometimes she's slow, but she always shows up. January hit like a freight train. I was 8.5 months pregnant, the size of a planet, and basically living in sweatpants. My ankles were swollen. My back hurt constantly. I had to pee every 15 minutes. And getting out of bed required planning and determination. But despite all of that, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Joy, not happiness. That was too simple. This was deeper, like I'd walked through fire and come out the other side different, but whole. I'd finished 12 new paintings, sold 9 of them, had a waiting list of commissions for after the baby was born. My Instagram following had grown to 15,000 people who seemed to actually care about my work. I'd saved enough money to take 6 months off before I'd need to go back to teaching. And most importantly, I'd stopped checking Ronan's social media, stopped wondering what he was doing or who he was with. I just didn't care anymore. That's how I knew I was healing. Not because I wasn't angry, I was still angry, but because the anger didn't control me anymore. The baby was due February 14th, Valentine's Day, because apparently the universe had a sense of humor. Your timing is terrible, I told my stomach, but we'll make it work. I packed my hospital bag 3 times, unpacked it twice because I forgot something, finally settled on what I actually needed. Comfortable clothes, phone charger, snacks, and a playlist titled Labor and Delivery that was way too cheerful for what was about to happen. My mom flew in on February 1st, 10 days early. "I'm not missing this," she said when I picked her up at the airport. "Besides, first babies are always late." She was wrong. February 7th. At 3 in the morning, I woke up to wetness and pain. My water had broken. "Mom!" I yelled from my bedroom. "Mom, it's time." She came running in her bathrobe, took one look at me, and went into crisis mode. Okay, we're okay. Get dressed. I'll grab the bag. We're doing this." "I'm not ready," I said, suddenly panicking. Nobody's ever ready. That's the secret they don't tell you. "Come on, baby girl. Let's go meet your baby." The drive to the hospital was surreal. Empty streets, dark sky, contractions that made me want to cry and swear and punch something. "Remember to breathe," Mom kept saying. "I am breathing." "Then breathe better." At the hospital, they got me checked in and hooked up to monitors. The contractions were coming fast. Too fast. "Looks like we're having a baby today," the nurse said cheerfully. Like this was fun. Like my entire body wasn't trying to turn itself inside out. "Can I still change my mind?" I gasped. She laughed. "Little late for that, hon." Mom held my hand and let me squeeze until I probably cut off her circulation. Hours passed. The pain got worse. I cried. I swore. I begged for drugs. They gave me an epidural, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. "I love modern medicine," I told the anesthesiologist. "I would die for you." "Let's just focus on not dying," he said with a smile. At some point, I lost track of time. A nurse asked if I wanted to call the father. "No," I said immediately. Mom gave me a look. "Alara." I said no, but the nurse wouldn't let it go. "If he wants to be here, maybe you should at least tell him you're in labor. He can make his own choice." I thought about it through another contraction. Thought about Ronan waiting by his phone, wondering. Thought about my baby being born without their father there. "Fine," I finally said. "Someone call him." Mom stepped into the hallway and made the call. Came back 2 minutes later. "He's on his way." And just like that, everything got more complicated. Ronan burst through the door of my hospital room 40 minutes later, wild-eyed and out of breath like he'd run the whole way. "I'm here," he gasped. "I'm here. I made it." I was in the middle of a contraction and couldn't respond. Just gripped the bed rail and tried not to scream. When it passed, I looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time in months. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair mess. Shirt buttoned wrong. "You didn't have to come," I said. "Yes, I did." He moved closer to the bed, then stopped like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "How are you?" "Stupid question. You're in labor. Of course you're not okay." Brilliant observation. My mom cleared her throat. "I'm going to get coffee. Give you 2 a minute." "Mom, you don't have to." But she was already gone. Silence filled the room except for the beeping of monitors and my heavy breathing. "Alara," Ronan started. "I know I don't deserve to be here. I know I messed up everything. But this baby, our baby, I want to do right by them." "I swear, Ido." "You said you wanted to do right by me too," I said quietly. "Remember our wedding vows? For better or worse. Sickness and health." He flinched. "I know. So forgive me if your promises don't mean much anymore." Another contraction hit before he could respond. This one worse than the last. I squeezed my eyes shut and focused on breathing through it. I felt his hand close over mine. Warm. Familiar. Wrong. I should have pulled away. Should have told him not to touch me. But in that moment, I needed someone to hold on to, and he was there. When the contraction passed, I looked down at our hands. His wedding ring was gone. Mine had been in a drawer for months. "Where's Lyra?" I asked. He looked away. "We're not together anymore." "What?" "She left me 2 weeks after she found out about the baby. Said she couldn't compete with you. That I'd always choose you over her." He laughed bitterly. "Ironic, right? Since I chose her over you first." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt sad. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry for all of it. For hurting you. For being a coward. For throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too stupid to realize what I had. Stop, I said. Alara, I don't want your apology. I don't want your regrets. I want you to be here for this baby. Not for me. Not because you feel guilty, but because you actually want to be a father. Can you do that? He nodded. Yes, I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. Then prove it, I said as another contraction started building. Prove you're not the man who walked out on me. The next few hours were a blur of pain and pushing and nurses telling me I was doing great when I felt like I was dying. Ronan stayed, held my hand, let me squeeze until his fingers turned white, brought me ice chips, and wiped my forehead with a cold cloth. He didn't try to fix anything, didn't make promises he couldn't keep, just stayed. And somewhere in the middle of the worst pain I'd ever experienced, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he meant it this time. At 2:47 p.m. on February 7th, my baby came into the world screaming. It's a boy, the doctor announced, holding up this tiny, red, perfect human. A boy. I had a son. They placed him on my chest, and the world stopped. Everything I'd been through, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the loneliness, all of it faded into background noise. This was what mattered. This tiny person who needed me, who I protect with everything I had. He's perfect, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You're perfect. Ronan was crying too, standing beside the bed, staring at our son like he couldn't believe he was real. Can I? His voice cracked. Can I hold him? I hesitated, then nodded. The nurse helped transfer the baby to Ronan's arms, and I watched him hold our son for the first time. Watched his face crumble with emotion. Ronan whispered. Budvi. I'm your dad, and I'm going to do better. I promise. I'm going to be better. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But trust isn't rebuilt in a moment. It's rebuilt in 1,000 small moments over time. What are you going to name him? The nurse asked. I looked at my son, at his tiny fingers and his button nose, and the way he fit so perfectly in Ronan's arms despite everything. Arden, I said. His name is Arden. That's beautiful, Ronan said softly. Does it mean something? It means great forest, I replied. Strong, enduring, able to weather any storm. Because that's what we'd do. My son and I, we'd weather whatever came next. Together. The first week home with Arden was chaos wrapped in exhaustion and covered in spit up. I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Every sound he made sent me into panic mode. Was he breathing? Was he too hot? Too cold? Hungry? Uncomfortable? My mom stayed for 2 weeks, thank God. She'd take Arden at night, so I could get a few hours of sleep. She'd cook meals I'd forget to eat. She'd tell me stories about when I was a baby and how she'd been terrified too. Nobody knows what they're doing, she said one night while I cried over spilled breast milk. We're all just pretending and hoping we don't break them. Ronan showed up every day, morning and evening, sometimes afternoon too. He'd hold Arden while I showered, change diapers without complaining, make formula runs at midnight when we ran out. He never asked to stay over, never pushed for more than I was willing to give. Just showed up consistently like he'd promised. It was strange having him around again. My apartment felt too small for the history between us. Every conversation was careful, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. But for Arden's sake, we made it work. You're good with him, I said one afternoon, watching Ronan rock our son to sleep. He's easy to love, Ronan replied without looking at me. The unspoken words hung between us. Unlike his mother, unlike what we used to be. When my mom flew back to Arizona, reality hit hard. I was on my own, me and Arden against the world. Except I wasn't completely on my own anymore. Ronan had become part of our routine, whether I liked it or not. He'd come over at 7 every morning, feed Arden while I got dressed. Then he'd go to work and come back at 6 for dinner. You don't have to do this every day, I told him after the first week. I want to, he said simply. I missed everything with the pregnancy. I'm not missing this. It would have been easier if he was terrible at it, if he was flaky or selfish or showed up late. Then I could justify keeping him at arm's length. But he wasn't. He was actually good, patient, present. Everything I needed him to be 9 months too late. One night, Arden wouldn't stop crying. Nothing worked. Not feeding, Not changing, not rocking, not singing. I was at my breaking point, tears streaming down my face when Ronan took him from my arms. "Go take a bath," he said gently. "I've got him. He won't stop crying." "I know, but you need a break. Go." I went, locked myself in the bathroom, and ran the water so hot it turned my skin pink. And I cried from exhaustion and frustration and the overwhelming weight of keeping a tiny human alive. When I came out 30 minutes later, the apartment was quiet. I found Ronan on the couch, Arden asleep on his chest, both of them breathing in sync. "How did you?" "He just needed his dad," Ronan said softly, looking up at me with something that looked like hope. And in that moment, I felt the wall around my heart crack just a little. Marla came to visit when Arden was 3 weeks old, brought groceries and wine I couldn't drink because I was breastfeeding. "So," she said, settling onto my couch while I fed the baby, "how's it going with Ronan?" "Fine. He's helping. And nothing. He's Arden's father. We're co-parenting." She raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No feelings? No complicated emotions?" I sighed. Of course there are feelings. I'm not a robot. But what am I supposed to do? He destroyed me. He chose Lyra. He left. And now he's back because there's a baby involved. Or maybe he's back because he realized what he lost. That doesn't fix what he did. "No," Marlo agreed. "But maybe it's a start." I didn't want to think about starts. Didn't want to consider the possibility that Ronan and I could be anything other than cordial co-parents. Because letting him back in meant risking everything again. And I'd barely survived the first time. But Arden complicated things. Every time I looked at my son, I saw Ronan's eyes, his smile, the way he scrunched his nose when he was falling asleep. And every time Ronan held him, I saw glimpses of the man I'd married. The one who danced with me in the kitchen and promised forever. That man had broken my heart. But maybe this man, this father holding our son like he was made of glass, maybe this man was different. Or maybe I was just exhausted and vulnerable and making excuses. One evening when Arden was 6 weeks old, Ronan didn't show up at his usual time. 6 o'clock came and went. Then 6:30, 7. I try not to panic. Try to tell myself he was just running late. But old fears crept in. This was it. He'd gotten bored. Realized being a father was harder than he thought. Found someone else who didn't come with baggage. By 7:30, I was furious. By 8, I was crying. Then I heard a knock at the door. Ronan stood there soaking wet. It was pouring rain, and he looked like he'd run through all of it. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I'm so sorry. There was an accident on the highway. My phone died. I couldn't call. I came as soon as I could." He held up a soggy bag. "I brought dinner. It's probably ruined now, but I tried. I should have stayed mad. Should have told him not showing up wasn't acceptable. But instead, I just stepped aside and let him in." "You're soaked," I said. "I'm fine. How's Arden?" "Asleep." Finally, he set the wet bag on the counter and turned to face me. "Alara, I know you don't trust me. I know I have to earn that. But I need you to know I'm not leaving. Not Arden. Not you. I'm here. I am staying. Even when it's hard. Even when you hate me. I am staying." Something in his voice, the rawness, the desperation, made me believe him. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." And for the first time since he'd walked back into my life, I let myself hope that maybe he meant it. Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow and bringing color back to the world. Arden was 3 months old and starting to smile at everything. My apartment had transformed into baby central. Toys everywhere, laundry piles that never ended, a schedule taped to the fridge because I couldn't remember anything anymore. Ronan had become a permanent fixture. He had a drawer in my dresser for the clothes he kept there, a toothbrush in the bathroom, his coffee mug in the cabinet. We weren't together. I reminded myself of that constantly. We were just two people raising a child and trying not to step on each other's emotional landmines. But the lines were getting blurry, like when I'd wake up to find Ronan asleep on my couch after a late-night feeding shift, or when he'd bring me coffee exactly how I liked it without me asking, or when our hands would brush reaching for Arden and neither of us would pull away immediately. "You two are like an old married couple," Marla observed one afternoon. She'd stopped by with lunch and found Ronan and me arguing about whether Arden was ready for solid foods yet. We're not, I started. We're just, Ronan said at the same time. Marla laughed. Right, just co-parenting. Sure. After she left, Ronan and I looked at each other awkwardly. We're not, right? I asked. Getting back together? No, he said quickly. Unless, do you want to? No, I don't know. Maybe. This is complicated. Very complicated. We left it at that. Because what else could we say? The past still sat between us like a wall. But Arden was building doorways through it every day. I started painting again when Arden would nap. Small pieces, nothing major. But it felt good to have my hands covered in color again. Ronan would watch sometimes, not saying anything, just sitting there while I worked. You're really talented, he said one day. I don't think I ever told you that enough. You were too busy with other things, I replied without thinking. The air went cold. He stood up to leave. Wait, I said. I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. It was completely fair, he said quietly. I was busy destroying the best thing in my life. You have every right to be angry. I'm tired of being angry, I admitted. It's exhausting. Then what do you want to be? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Happy. I want to be happy. I want Arden to be happy. I want us to figure out how to be a family, even if it doesn't look like what I originally planned. He nodded slowly. I want that too. That night, after Arden went to sleep, Ronan and I sat on the couch with tea and talked. Really talked. About everything we'd been avoiding. Why? I asked. Why Lyra? Why did you throw us away for her? He was quiet for a long time. I don't have a good answer. I was selfish. She made me feel exciting and young, and like I wasn't just a construction worker married to a teacher living a boring life. The words stung, but I needed to hear them. Our life wasn't boring to me, I said. I know, and that's the thing I couldn't see until it was too late. What I thought was boring was actually peace, contentment, real love, not fireworks, not drama. Just steady, every day, show up and choose each other love. And with Lyra, it was a fantasy. It felt big and intense, but it wasn't real. She didn't actually love me. She loved the idea of taking something that wasn't hers. And when the excitement wore off and real life set in, there was nothing underneath. I wanted to feel triumphant. Wanted to say I told you so, but I just felt sad. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I don't deserve that, but I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed, that I can be the man you thought you married, the father Arden deserves. You're already being that father, I said softly. You show up every day. You don't complain. You're patient and present, and everything I needed you to be before. And as he hesitated, as your co-parent, you're doing okay there too, I admitted. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. The kind of silence that only exists between people who've survived something terrible together. Can I ask you something? He said. Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy? I'd known this question was coming eventually, because I didn't want you to come back out of obligation. If you're going to be in our lives, I needed it to be because you wanted to be, not because you had to be.
That makes sense, he said. But man, Ilera, when I saw you in that parking lot, 7 months pregnant with my child, and realized you'd been going through all of it alone. His voice cracked. I felt like the worst person alive. You were pretty high on that list, I said with a small smile. He laughed sadly. Fair. Arden cried from the bedroom, and we both stood up at the same time. Our eyes met, and something passed between us. Something that felt like forgiveness, or maybe just the possibility of it. I'll get him, Ronan said. Actually, I stopped him. Maybe we both can. We walked to the nursery together, and as we stood over our son's crib, watching him settle back to sleep, I realized something. I wasn't the same Ilera who'd been betrayed, and he wasn't the same Ronan who'd betrayed me. We were different people now, shaped by pain and parenthood and the hard work of showing up every day. Maybe that was enough to start building something new. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was dead and buried. But something different. Something stronger. Something earned through brokenness instead of borrowed from naivety. Or maybe I was just sleep-deprived and overthinking everything. Either way, I wasn't ready to decide tonight. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't closing the door completely. I was leaving it open. Just a crack. Summer hit hard that year. The kind of heat that made everything sticky and slow and unbearable. Arden was 6 months old, sitting up on his own, and developing a personality that made everyone who met him smile. He was curious about everything. Loud. Happy. The complete opposite of the chaos he'd been born into. I'd gone back to teaching part-time at the community center, running evening art classes for adults. It wasn't much money, but it got me out of the apartment and back to doing what I loved. Ronan would stay with Arden those nights, and every time I came home, I'd find them in the same spot. Ronan on the floor, building block towers for Arden to knock down, both of them laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "You're too good at this," I told him one night. "At what? Being knocked down?" He grinned. "I've had practice." The joke was dark, but I laughed anyway. Things between us had shifted. We weren't just co-parenting anymore. We were friends. Real friends. The kind who could joke about past pain because we'd survived it. But there was something else too. Something neither of us was acknowledging. The way his hand would linger on my back when he helped me with dishes. The way I'd catch myself watching him play with Arden and feeling something I wasn't ready to name. The way we'd end up sitting close on the couch, even when there was plenty of room. "You should go out," Marla said one afternoon. "On a date. With Ronan. We're not dating." "Elara, honey, you're doing everything couples do except kissing and having sex." "That's a big except." "Is it though? You still love him. Don't even try to deny it." I wanted to deny it. Wanted to say I'd moved on. That the love I'd felt for Ronan had died with our marriage. But that would be a lie. I'd never stopped loving him. I just stopped trusting him. And trust was harder to rebuild than love. One evening in July, Ronan showed up with an actual plan. "Get dressed," he said. "Excuse me. Nothing fancy. Just jeans. But get dressed. We're going out." "What about Arden?" "Your mom's on video call standby. Marla's on emergency backup. We're covered." "Ronan, I don't think—" "Please," he said softly. "Just trust me. One night. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I said yes. He took me to the lake. The same lake where Lyra and I used to sit in college. The same lake where I'd cried after seeing them together. "Why here?" I asked as we walked down to the dock. "Because it's where you scattered our old life," he said. "And I thought maybe we could start building a new one." He'd brought a picnic basket. Nothing fancy. Just sandwiches and fruit and the grape soda I used to love in college. We sat on the dock with our feet in the water as the sun started setting. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said suddenly. I looked at him, surprised. Started right after Lyra left. I needed to figure out why I sabotaged everything good in my life. Why I wasn't happy when I had every reason to be. And did you figure out? Some of it. Turns out I have this pattern. I get scared when things are too good. Like I don't deserve happiness. So I blow it up before it can blow up on me. He picked at the label on his soda bottle. "Pretty messed up, right?" "Pretty human," I said. "We all have our damage." "Yeah, but mine hurt you. Hurt us. And I can't undo that. But I can promise I'm working on it. Working on being better." We sat in silence for a while. The water lapped against the dock. Cicadas sang in the trees. The sky turned pink and orange and purple. "I'm scared," I admitted, "of letting you back in. Of getting hurt again." "I know. I'm scared too." "Of what?" "That I'll mess up again. That I'll prove I'm exactly who you think I am. That I'll hurt you or Arden and you'll never forgive me." "You're already forgiven," I said quietly. He turned to look at me, eyes wide. "What?" "I forgave you months ago. I had to. For me. For Arden. Holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting you to die." I took a breath. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean automatic trust. It just means I'm choosing not to let what you did define my entire life. "Elara, let me finish. You hurt me. You broke my heart in ways I didn't think I'd survive. But you also gave me Arden. And you've shown up every single day since you found out about him. Not perfectly, but consistently. And that matters." "So what does this mean?" he asked. "For us?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe we take it slow. Figure out who we are now instead of trying to be who we were before. See if this new version of us actually works. Like dating." "Like dating," I agreed. "But with a kid. And a lot of baggage. And no guarantees." He smiled. Actually smiled. The real kind that reached his eyes. "I can work with that." As the sun dipped below the horizon, he reached for my hand. And this time, I let him take it. Because maybe second chances weren't about going back to what was. Maybe they were about building something completely new from the ruins of what used to be. And maybe, just maybe, we could do that together. Fall came with cool air and golden leaves, and Arden's first birthday creeping closer. Ronan and I had been officially dating for 3 months. Taking it slow, like we'd promised. Real dates when my mom or Marla could babysit. Movie nights after Arden went to sleep. Long conversations about everything and nothing. It felt different this time. Less desperate. More intentional. We weren't kids anymore playing it forever. We were adults who'd been broken and were choosing each other anyway. It wasn't always easy. Some days I'd look at him and remember everything he'd done. The betrayal would hit me fresh, and I'd have to step away and breathe through it. But those days were getting further apart, replaced by new memories. Better ones. Memories of Ronan changing diapers at 3 a.m. without complaining. Of him teaching Arden to clap. Of him holding me while I cried about postpartum hormones and the fear of not being enough. "You're more than enough," he'd whisper into my hair. "You're everything." One afternoon in late October, we were at the park. Arden was practicing walking between us, falling on his diapered bottom every few steps and laughing like it was hilarious. "He's going to be running soon," Ronan said, scooping him up and spinning him around. Then we're in real trouble. I watched them together, my son and his father. And I felt something click into place. Like a puzzle piece I've been trying to force, finally fitting where it belonged. "Marry me," Ronan said suddenly. I froze. "What?" He set Arden down in the grass and turned to face me fully. "Marry me. Again. For real this time." "Ronan, we've only been dating 3 months." "I know. And I know I don't deserve a second chance at this. But Alara, I wake up every morning grateful you're giving me one anyway. I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I don't want to waste another second of my life not being completely yours." We said we'd take it slow. I reminded him, even though my heart was racing. "We're taking it slow. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking if you'll consider spending the rest of your life with someone who's learned how valuable you are, who won't ever take you for granted again, who will show up every day and choose you and Arden over everything else." People at the park were starting to stare. Arden was eating grass. My whole world was tilting. "This is crazy," I said. "Completely crazy," he agreed. "So, is that a yes?" I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man he'd become, at the father he'd proven himself to be, at the way he looked at me like I was the sun and moon and stars. This wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined at 24. This was messy and complicated and built on broken pieces glued back together. But maybe that made it stronger. Maybe things rebuilt are tougher than things that never broke. "Ask me again in 6 months," I said, "if you still feel this way, if we're still working, if we still make sense. Ask me again, and I'll give you an answer." He looked disappointed for half a second. Then he smiled. "I could do 6 months. I'll wait as long as you need." "Good, because I'm worth waiting for." "You're worth everything," he said. We took Arda home and gave him a bath and put him to bed. And then we sat on my couch like we'd done 100 times before. "Thank you," Ronan said quietly, "for not giving up on me, on us." "Thank you for not giving up either," I replied. "For showing up, for trying." "I'll keep showing up," he promised. "Every day, for the rest of my life, whether you marry me or not." And I believed him, not because he said it, but because he'd proven it. Day after day, month after month, he'd shown me who he was now. Sometimes betrayal doesn't end in revenge. Sometimes it ends in redemption. Not the kind where everything goes back to normal, but the kind where you build something better from the ashes. I'd lost my best friend, lost my first marriage, lost the naive girl who believed in perfect love stories. But I'd gained something too. I'd gained strength I didn't know I had. I'd gained a son who lit up my world. I'd gained a partner who'd learned the hard way what he had and was determined never to lose it again. Was it a happy ending? I don't know, because the story isn't over. But it's a happy middle, and sometimes that's enough. 6 months later, on Arden's first birthday, Ronan asked me again. We were in my apartment. Our apartment now, since he'd officially moved in 2 months earlier, surrounded by family and friends and way too much cake. Arden was covered in frosting, grinning at everyone like he'd just conquered the world. And Ronan got down on one knee right there in my tiny living room and pulled out a simple ring. "Alara Mendez," he said, "you've given me more second chances than I deserve. You've shown me what real love looks like. Not the easy kind, the hard kind, the show up even when it hurts kind. I'm asking you one more time. Will you marry me?" Everyone went quiet, waiting. I looked at Arden, clapping his sticky hands together. Looked at Ronan, nervous and hopeful and completely vulnerable. Looked at my mom, wiping tears from her eyes. Looked at Marla, giving me 2 thumbs up. This was my life now. Not the one I planned. Not the one I dreamed about as a girl. But mine. Real. Imperfect. Beautiful. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The room erupted in cheers. Ronan stood up and kissed me while everyone applauded, and Arden shrieked with delight, even though he had no idea what was happening. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. Because sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones where nothing goes wrong. They're the ones where everything goes wrong, and you choose to rebuild anyway. Where betrayal doesn't destroy you. It transforms you. Where the person who broke your heart learns to be worthy of holding it again. Where you discover that happy endings aren't about perfection. They're about choosing each other, again and again, through the mess and the pain and the beautiful chaos of life. 3 years later, I stood in our backyard watching Ronan push Arden on the swing set. Watching our daughter, 2-year-old Maya, toddle after butterflies in the grass. We got married again. Small ceremony. Just family. Just us promising to choose each other every day for the rest of our lives. It hadn't been perfect. We'd fought, had hard conversations, gone to couples therapy, worked through triggers and trust issues and all the complicated feelings that come with loving someone who hurt you. But we'd made it. We were making it. One day at a time. "Mama, watch," Arden yelled, jumping off the swing midair. "I see you, baby. Be careful." Ronan caught my eye and smiled. The kind of smile that said we did this. We built this. Together. And I smiled back. Because he was right. We'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into something beautiful. Not by pretending it didn't happen, but by acknowledging it did and choosing to build something better anyway. That's the secret nobody tells you. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone imperfect and deciding they're worth the work. Worth the forgiveness. Worth the risk of trying again. Ronan was worth it. We were worth it. And this life we'd built from broken pieces, it was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. Because in the end, I didn't just survive betrayal. I turned it into the foundation of something stronger than what came before. And that, more than revenge or justice or anything else, was the truest form of winning. Not because I got my happy ending, but because I chose it, built it, earned it, and I'd do it all again. Every heartbreak, every tear, every moment of pain, because it led me here, to this backyard, to these children, to this man who learned the hard way what he had and never took it for granted again. This was my story, not the one I expected, but the one I chose. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that healing is possible, or showed you that second chances can be real, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next story. And please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories inspire others who might be going through their own battles. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone, that they can survive, that they can rebuild. Hit that subscribe button, and let's continue sharing these powerful stories together.